Hey students, this week we are going to be working on our two final products for the Quien assignment, or the Quien project rather, that we've been working on for the past month. And I'm really excited to see your final products. A couple of points of clarification before we get started. So going into the Summit platform, I know that there are four final products listed, and I've had a lot of questions about how we are going to get all four final products completed for the Quien assignment. So what I want to make sure that you know is that because we are now working on this assignment through remote learning, the only two final products that are going to be due in this assignment are your primary source analysis, or is your primary source analysis final product, as well as your narrative final product. The reason for this is that we are not able, it's much more difficult for us to arrange presentations as well as paperwork through remote learning. So for that reason, the only two final products that I'm assigning in the Quien unit is going to be your primary source analysis as well as your narrative final product. You are able, you have you can, this is completely optional. If you have a printer at home, you can work on your Mesoamerican map at home. And this would be if your personal island assignment, if you didn't get a great grade on your personal island assignment and you would like to improve that overall grade, if you are wanting to do that or interested in doing that, you can work on your Mesoamerican map. But remember, the Mesoamerican map is completely optional. I've had a lot of panicked emails in the last couple of days about your narrative presentation Mesoamerican map. Your narrative presentation will not be assigned, and your Mesoamerican map, again, is completely optional. So in today's lesson, we are going to go over your primary source analysis final product as well as your narrative final product. I have been so ridiculously proud of some of the narratives that I've already read, your creativity as well as your work to make sure that this fictional work stays true to the situation that the Aztecs and the Incas, as well as the Tiano and the Maya were facing during that time. The painstaking work that you've done to make it a realistic historical fiction has been something I have been incredibly proud of. And so today we're just going to go over the steps to make sure you have the tools that you need so that you can get the best grade possible on your primary source analysis and your narratives in your Quien project. That's what we are going to work on today in today's lesson. All right, let's get started. All right, students, so to start class, you're going to navigate over to Google Classroom. With each class, I will always post on Google Classroom, and in those posts, I will include a checklist for what your expectations are going to be for this week. And so once you go to Google Classroom and once you click on that checklist, it's going to take you over to Google Docs. And there you're going to see what the expectations are for today. So last week, just in a bit of review, we worked on checkpoint 3, which was your point of view practice, and you read background info on Hernan Cortez's plot to conquer modern day Mexico City, And I think the big takeaway here is that we had studied other documentation where the Spanish had told priests about how their main mission in quote-unquote the New World and what is modern-day Mexico was simply to save the people, whether it be the Aztecs. If you go down to South America, you'll see that they used similar language to try to justify their expansion into Inca territories too. But the Spanish were saying that their primary goal and their primary objective was simply to try to save the souls of the people who were living in the New World. But what we find when we actually look at what Hernan Cortez said in private, when it was just in private, when he had a chance to try to justify his actions to the King of Spain, he did not talk about this mission to save people's souls. No, what Hernan Cortez talked about was to just extend Spain's power. essentially to send a message to anyone who wanted to challenge Spain that they were the most powerful empire in the world. And we kind of saw the true story, why Spain was actually expanding into the New World. It wasn't a mission to save anyone. It was a mission to expand their power. And we also read a primary source. We started our final product number 1, and we read our third primary source that came from a Spanish priest who was horrified. The Spanish priest came under that assumption that he was going to come to help save people, that this was a mission to help save other people. And what he found was actually that the Spanish were committing incredible acts of brutality against the Aztec population. So much so that it was horrifying and made the Spanish priest absolutely sick to watch. And I think what's important about this example is that there are many examples in history, and unfortunately, we see this with neocolonialism today, where a country will invade another territory, or a civilization will invade another territory with this promise that they're doing this to help the people who are inside of that territory. And unfortunately, so often, as we've seen in history through these examples of colonialism and through these examples of war where one country conquers another, the actual goal is never to save the people or to actually help the people who are inside of those territories, but to actually just expand their own power to make themselves more powerful rather than to help anyone else. Now, there are absolutely some examples in history where we have seen conflict, where we have seen peacekeeping missions, where we have seen countries intervene to try to prevent war happening from other countries. But these examples are few and far between, especially when we look at this era in history, when we look at this time between the 1400s and the 1500s. What we see civilizations and kingdoms and empires who are looking to expand their power, who are looking to become more powerful, who are looking to get access to resources from the New World, who are simply going to make them more powerful than anyone else rather than actually helping anyone. And this was absolutely clear when we looked at Hernan Cortez's letter, as well as looking at the primary source number 3 that we read in our first final product. So with that review, we're going to look at the expectations for today. We're going to try to finish final product number 1, which is our primary source analysis, and then we're going to finish a rough draft of final product number 2. Mrs. Gutierrez was kind enough to write a sample story for final product number 2 here, and this would be a wonderful way for you to look at the story for inspiration, but also try to imagine yourself in the time period of the 1400s and 1500s. One of the first stories I read had Iron Man going through a portal created by Doctor Strange, and as much as I love that creativity and imagination, we have to try to keep this an accurate and historical fiction for that time. So you will be limited to the technologies that we had in that era. And now that I think of it, we even today still don't have access to a lot of the technologies created by Iron Man. And as far as I know, I don't know any Sorcerer Supreme like Doctor Strange either. So with that all said, the story that you write, try to make sure you are keeping it historically accurate for that time period. But we'll start by looking at final product number 1. So students, in your first final product, we're going to navigate over to the Summit platform. All right, and then go to primary source analysis under your Quien Soy assignment. And when you click on the primary source analysis, you're going to see primary source number 3. Primary source number 3, as a reminder, is what we read last week. That came from the priest who documented how Spain was absolutely destroying the Aztec Empire and some of the atrocities that the Spanish were committing in the New World. That was in final product or in primary source number 3. Today we are going to read primary source number 1 as well. And after reading primary source number 1, you are going to answer the remaining questions. We answered questions A and B last week. this week, I want you to answer the remainder of the questions. And you're going to find that a lot of the questions are centered on this idea of tone. And so whenever you're answering these questions, you have the ability to answer either talking about primary source number 3 or primary source number 1. But what's important is that when you start your answers, that you clarify to me whether or not you're talking about the first primary source or the third primary source. And an easy way to do that is just typing out in primary source number, and then you can type in 1 or 3 and tell me about your answer. So I know we've talked about this in English, but it's worth having a review about what is tone. So in this writing, what you need to figure out when you're looking at this idea of tone is how the author feels about what they are writing. And so it's not what you're seeing from the writing itself, it is the author's feeling about the writing. And when I say feeling, I'm looking for that emotional attachment to that feeling. So is the author angry about what they are seeing? Is the author happy about what they are seeing? Is the author feeling somber? There's a $10 word right there, about what they are writing about. This is really important. And so make sure you're understanding where or how the author feels, and tell me that in your answer. You get bonus points if you quote directly from either primary source number 3 or primary source number 1 when you are quoting your answer. And so be sure to go through each of these questions and tell me about how each one will help influence the tone. You do have an optional question here if you're wanting to go from your top score of a 4 and to try to get a 5. You can talk to me about the word choice that the author chose to use as well in their own writing. All right, so students, with that, that is final product number 1. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. That will be due this next week, so make sure we get that done. For next week's class, the other final product we will be working on is our narrative final product. And this is the one that we've been working on in class, that we worked on face-to-face, and we kind of worked through writing Three Little Pigs. We first started by writing different points of view of the Three Little Pigs. We explored that article in the New York Times that looked at different points of view in our news broadcasts, and we've looked at different points of view of the Spanish and European colonization of the New World. And so this is what we've been building towards, where your challenge now is to write as if you were part of the Tiano, the Aztec, the Maya, or the Inca tribes, and suddenly you are writing as if you're part of those civilizations, and suddenly the Spanish start invading. And you need to write a historically accurate example of that. But I want you to really explore and really think about what that would feel like if you've lived in your home for your entire life, and suddenly your home is taken away by someone, and how difficult that would be. I've had some students ask if they can write about what was happening with smallpox. And from some of their experiences, some people have already had some experiences with COVID, and asking if they could take some of those experiences. I had one student send me an email that they didn't really understand how terrifying something like smallpox could be until everything that's happened with COVID. And students, that is completely up to you. It is whatever direction you want to go in. So some students have talked about how they plan on writing about battles that happen. Some students are talking about how they want to talk about betrayals that happen, conversations where the Aztecs made arrangements and deals with the Spanish, and having those deals betrayed. And some students have asked if they can talk about smallpox. Students, as long as you are staying within the historical context and keeping it historically accurate, you are welcome to go whichever direction you feel would be best for your story. And so one final example. All right, so students, just going back, if at any point you feel like you're lost in this assignment, Mrs. Gutierrez's sample story is going to be in your Week 2 digital learning checklist, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Students, you are tasked to finish the draft of your story by the end of next week, which is April 17th. Your rough draft will be due by our next class, and you are going to be asked to finish your first final product. Students, I've been very impressed with the work I've seen on your first final product so far, as well as the creativity I'm seeing in your assignments. Students, keep it up, and if you have any questions at any time, don't hesitate to reach out and through email and let me know how I can assist you. Thank you for your hard work, students.